Alright, so here's my daughter's vision for her archway. She envisions a hexagon with the bottom leg removed, a double hexagon that's approximately 7 feet by 7 feet, with the ability to have vegetation hanging down from it, flowers and ferns and whatnot. So she envisions this being about 7 by 7, and I think that's going to be a little bit too small because the groom is 6'3", and with the flowers hanging down, they're going to be dancing on top of his head. So I think I'm going to try to make this between 8 and 9 feet tall, somewhere in that range, but keep the 2-foot depth. This also has to be light, transportable, easily assembled, easily broken down, moved from the wedding site to the reception site. So we have a bit of a task on our hand. She asked for dowels, and that's what she's going to get. This is what we're going to be doing for her, because when your daughter asks for something for her wedding, well, Dad sure is going to try his best to get that accomplished. So, based on her vision, I went ahead and made a mini mock-up of what I think this thing is going to look like. I just grabbed some plywood and cut it. Anyway, these are 60-degree angles, and each one of these legs will be approximately 5 feet tall, which should give me over 8 feet of height, which should be enough for the groom. So, this should be about between 8 and 9 feet tall, between 8 and 9 feet wide. This leg will be missing. There will be no bottom leg of this hexagon. And this has to be able to be secured to the ground. So I envision something like this, where these go together, so that this double hexagon can have individual panels and be assembled and disassembled, moved, and be light. So then I moved on to my full-scale mock-up with each leg being 5 feet long and then cut to 60-degree angles. And this is what I ended up with. It came out to be 8 feet 5 1/2 inches tall and about the same width. So this height should be sufficient to not have the groom having flowers and ferns sitting upon the top of his head. So each leg is just made out of a very thin strip of old plywood that I had lying around in the yard. So what I'm planning on doing is I'm planning on using these thin strips on the bottom of my dowels so that I have a consistent clock position to cut the angles. So all I'm going to do is lay the dowels on, which I've already cut out to 5 feet. I'm going to lay them down on top of each strip and put some glue, maybe in 2 or 3 spots, just a small amount of glue, just to hold it in a consistent spot so that when I go to cut the angles, the dowel won't rotate on me. In addition to that, I'll be wrapping tape around the end of each dowel in an effort to prevent tear out on the backside. So I also took some yellow paint and I misted everything on here so that when I remove these, I at least have a reference. Alright, I have a centerline reference. I got some tape wrapped around this thing, and all I'm going to do is just put some glue on this line, all in a line, turn it so that the glue faces the board and place it down. And then just let it dry. Once it's dry, I'll come back and I'll do the cuts. In the meantime, I'm going to mark up my table saw, and I might even have to make a sled to do this. We'll see. Alright, so this is my table saw. This is an old Delta model, and it was actually given to me. It had gotten wet, it was in a flood, and it was sitting around for years, and so someone gave it to me, and I went around and loosened everything up and cleaned everything up best as I could, and at least I have a table saw now. So I need to find the angle for these cuts, and this is going to be a 60-degree angle. So all I did was I went online and I printed out a protractor and then came out here, and since I have already scribed the alignment points with my blade here and here, this is all I did to find the angle on it. So I did all this because I didn't trust the miter that came with it, and I may have to make a sled for this job. We'll see about that, but I'm going to use what I have. So I printed this out, I lined it up, and I actually marked on the table saw with just a mush pen where those 60-degree angles would come in relation to where I believed it was going to make initial contact with the saw blade as it was up. That wasn't strictly necessary, but I just did it for consistency. So, these are the scribe marks, aligning with the blade. I printed out protractor. And these are the lines, 60-degree lines. So, when I put my square on here, and I put this up against here, aligning the lines. And then snugging that up a bit. It's really difficult to see from here, but it actually came out to 60 1/4 degrees. And this thing is non-standard and it floats around a lot, so I'm really not anticipating highly accurate cuts here. If I was working on an airplane, I would have to be in New Guinea someplace doing this to fool around with this kind of stuff. Anyway, I did the same operation on both sides, and on this side it came out to be 60 1/2 degrees on my miter slide here. So I'm not sure whether I'm just going to try to use the miter and hold it in place to do these cuts. I may try an experimental cut or two to see if it works okay, and if not, then I'm going to have to make a sled so that I can do these 60-degree cuts. Alright, so this is just going to be a test cut. I've got one of the dowels. I just taped up one of the ends. This is a spare piece. I got my miter gauge set to the 60-degree line. This is just going to be a test to see if this is actually going to work this way or whether I'll have to build a sled. And I want to see and try to ensure that I don't have a bunch of chip out on the back side of this dowel. So here we go. Alright, so let's take a look at this. Alright, somehow I didn't cut quite all the way through right here. There's a little nub that I would have to sand down. But the rest of the cut looks not bad. I think I may have to raise the blade just a little bit. I noticed that as I'm cutting, this blade has a tendency to go back down. So I'm going to reset this blade and we'll take it from there. But I think I may be able to successfully make a cut like this without building a separate sled. So I'm going to try it. Alright, so this is what these dowels look like. All I did was grab a thin piece of plywood and glue it to the bottom where these tape marks are, so that I could have a continuous clock position without being afraid that they will rotate between cuts, so that I get the same cut on one side of the dowel as I do on the other side of the dowel. This is my cutting setup over here. Since the dowel was long enough to cause a problem, I just grabbed a sawhorse and put a piece of plywood on it that's the same height as my table saw. Then I just taped some kitchen wax paper onto it, just so that this can glide. And I'm just using this setup right here, so that I can align the very edge, back edge of the dowel, along with the center line of the blade. Alright, let's go ahead and make a cut. Alright, so there's the cut. Not perfect. I think the blade is jumping around a little bit. But we're going to flip it around and do the other side. Alright, so that's how the cuts are coming out. It looks like I have a minimum, if any tear out at all. I think the tape has helped. But they look clean enough to do what I'm going to be doing. So, we're going to do them all like this. Although, if I had to do it a lot more than this, I definitely would have made a sled. Getting this adjustment just right before I make the cut takes a lot of fiddling around. Alright, so we're just going to break these glue bonds and peel off the tape. Alright, so these are my stretchers, and what I did was I made a template to bring them down to their final dimensions and to position them with the screw holes. So, this template I went ahead and drilled the 1/4-inch holes where I thought they needed to be, and I also drilled some 7/64 holes in a little grid pattern for the screws that will go through the stretcher and hold the dowel on like this. So after I've drilled these holes, I'm going to go ahead and bring the stretchers down to their final dimensions. 1/4-inch bolts for locating. And now we're going to go and drill these small holes. Alright, I've aligned the pilot holes up with the template, and now we're just going to drill a hole. Alright, so these 4 pieces are the only parts I really need to produce one frame section. So we have the 2 stretchers and the 2 dowels, and we're just going to put these together now. Show you how I do that. So I've put the dowel on a temporary jig. It's just a 2x4 with a couple of runners up here to hold this thing in place, and a 60-degree angle on either side to help me align the stringers when I put them in place. Just to help me hold everything steady while I go ahead and drill these and run a couple of screws through them. Now I was going to use dowels to hold this together, but then I thought, well, with 1/4-inch dowels, am I going to run out of room, and will it be strong enough? Will it go deep enough? I wasn't sure. So I decided to use some of these Power Pro Premium exterior wood screws. The instructions say that they don't need to be countersunk or pre-drilled, but in order to ensure that I don't crack this dowel, I am going to pre-drill these things, even though the screws packaging and instruction says it's not necessary. So I'm just going to center this, and I pre-drilled 3 holes over here just in case I need one side or the other. In this particular dowel, I'm going to be using the middle screw and the one on this side over here. So all I've done is center the stringer on the dowel, and I'm just going to drill these 2 holes. So since these are 2-inch screws, I set my drill bit to a 2-inch depth. Now I'm not going to drive these in to their finished depth because afterwards, after I've got everything together, I'm going to take everything apart and then make sure that these joints are really solid by gluing them and then running the screws back into their full depth so that they're set below this surface here so that it doesn't interfere with the next piece, next leg coming up against it. So we want these countersunk. Alright, it's time to install the second dowel, and I have to put it on the floor because otherwise it's too tall and too cumbersome for me. So all I'm going to do is stick it on the floor, line up the dowel with the end of the board, press the pieces together, and then drill these holes. Alright, that's good enough for now. Now I'm going to repeat the other side. Alright, now that we have this frame down here assembled, let's go ahead and put this thing together and check for fitment and see how it goes. So I'm going to be using 1/4-inch carriage bolts for this. And wing nuts, 1/4-20 wing nuts, just to make this assembly process at the site of the wedding quick and painless. And what I'm planning on doing is gluing the carriage bolts into place into one of the pieces so that I don't have to mess with it when I get there. Okay, so this is what it looks like from a top view. And from a long distance, kind of a side view. Now, we have one more leg to go, and this leg is going to be a little bit different because the angle on the bottom side is reversed. It's still 60 degrees, but it's reversed. So we have one angle here, which is 60 degrees. However, when you get to the bottom side, if you look at the paint on the floor, still 60 degrees, but it's reversed. It's going in the opposite direction. And that's so that, like on this side, the bottom piece will fit flat on the ground. Because if it was the normal 60 degrees, it would not fit. It would be kind of like this. So it's still 60 degrees, this angle, but it's just reversed. So when I made this jig, I made one side of it 60 degrees at the regular angle, which is most of the cuts. On the other side of the jig, I made a 60-degree angle, but it's reversed from the other one, so that this side is different from that side, so that the bottom pieces fit flat on the ground. Time to cut the lattice work. I'm just going to use my jigsaw, and rain is starting to come sideways through my work area as we speak. So I'm taking the individual panels apart, and I'll be pulling out the screws that I put in to hold the stretchers to the dowels. And then I'll be making a glue bob between the stretcher and the dowel and just putting things back. In this case, I've chosen to use the Tight Bond 2 because I expect this to be outdoors and it will be getting wet. I'm also going to countersink these a little bit, just so that I know that the heads of the screw can be below this so they won't interfere when I go to put it back together. And clean up the squeeze out with a wet rag. Well, I'm going to set these things on the side for right now, and I'm going to do all of them. Then I'm going to come back and I'm going to paint these white, and then we'll reassemble it. Alright, now that we've got these pieces painted up, let's put them together. And since it's only been a few hours since this paint is cured, I'm just going to stick some wax paper in the joint, just to make sure I can get it apart afterwards. Alright, so when I went to put the arch up the first time, I discovered that it was too flexible. When I originally made the design, it was supposed to be made out of steel, and I didn't have to worry about that flexibility, because if I had made it out of steel the way I was going to originally, it would have supported the weight just fine and it wouldn't have flexed at all. But I made it out of wood, and I did not take that into consideration as a design change, and I just made it. So therefore, now I have got to put braces in the corners so this thing is a lot more stable. So all I did was I make this basic scroll work cutout, and I'm going to put it in each corner of the hexagon. Okay, doubling up on these boards. I just secured them one to another with a couple of screws, and we're just going to cut out the line. So here's a typical cutout of what the angle brace looks like. And this is my setup for placing them. For the screw holes, I made this little jig right here, which has 3 holes in it. All I do is I place the jig against the corner, and then I can have consistent spacing throughout all the ones that I do. And this little block is an effort to help me drill the hole straight as much as I can, because I've got a long drill bit here, and it's really going to be difficult to get this thing straight all the way through. So I'm going to be setting up my drill bit with a stop. That way, by the time I drill all the way through, I'll come to a stop about the depth of where that 3-inch wood screw is going to end up being. Let's go ahead and do an initial drill and see where the hole starts to form on the brace. I'm going to be putting a dowel between the top and the bottom braces, and to do that and to locate it about the same spot, I'm just using my original template. I am lining the line up here, the center line, with the joint right there, and I'm just kind of placing it so that it's touching both dowels, lining up with the joint, and then I put a little pip mark right about where I thought I wanted it to be, and I just made a little pip mark, and then I came back and circled it, and I did the same thing on the bottom, top and bottom, both sides. And here's a quick shot of what it looks like with the angle braces on without the dowels. Alright, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut some dowels, and I'm going to mount them between the braces in like manner. So the next step will be to cut all the dowels to size and then find the center and mark the center and drill some holes in them. Alright, in order to find the center of my dowel, I'm just going to use a small square and a speed square on top of that. So my small square is just going to be sitting on the dowel edges like this, and my speed square I'm going to put on top, and I'm going to place the 2 edges together on the back like this, and then I'm going to line this 45-degree angle on the speed square up with the corner of the other square. Just like that. I'm going to place this on top of the dowel with the square resting on the edges and then the speed square resting on top. So then I'm just going to go ahead and mark a line, strike a line. I'm going to rotate this a bit, make sure I'm still on the right in the corner, and press together. Oops. Strike another line, move it again. I should have put some tape on this on the back side so it doesn't move around so much. And then strike another line. And there you can see the center. So in like manner, I'm going to do all the dowels on both sides and then drill a hole. Alright, so I'm going to turn my attention to the base now. What I'm planning on doing is I'm making a little platform out of a 4x8 sheet of plywood. The platform is going to consist of 2x4s built underneath it. So I've laid out where the bottom legs of the arch are going to meet this base. And the plan is to go ahead and use these threaded inserts, which will go into the 2x4s underneath to bolt the base down on so that it can be removable. And hopefully this 4x8 sheet of plywood will give me the stability I need, especially in wind, or especially if this it's on uneven ground. All right, so this is the first view of the wedding arch mounted on the platform. It actually looks quite a bit bigger while it's standing up here than it does on the ground. So the first thing on the list is to make some braces. Braces that stick out towards the sides and towards the back to stabilize the arch, and then I think we'll be good to go. So in order to get these angles to be correct, I had to make a template. So the first thing I did was put up an old piece of scrap plywood that I have. Mounted it like that, and then I just drew all the places that it made, so I had the basic triangle of what could fit. So I took that triangle, cut it out, and made some scroll work on this thing, which was inspired by the scroll work that's already on the arch. And now we're going to go ahead and cut this out on the real pieces that are going to go in, using this as a template. Alright, so here's our template laid on a little plywood. I just took a pad, marked the outline, and now I'm just going to go ahead and cut it out. Alright, now I have all four of these cut out, and it's time for everyone's favorite part. You guessed it. Alright, here we are in the front yard, and this is how I'm putting the lower braces on. I put the lattice work into place, the screws into place partly. So we have the lower braces down here, and all I'm doing is I'm squaring them up. And then on this side, I'm using this block like this to secure the lower brace to the frame. So there's going to be screws over here going out into the frame, and screws over here going into this block to hold this in place. So right now I'm going to do that first. I'm just going to line this up in the middle of the dowel. Alright, I'm going to be getting in my own way here, but anyway. This bracket will go on the base and against this. Screws will come in from the outside, screws will go in on the top here, and that will secure this bracket. So let me, we have the brace held in place with a clamp right here. I'm just going to square this up with the base. Probably going to get in my own way while I'm doing this, so sorry if I block the view. Alright, so this is my custom height setup here. Just a weight, a couple of random pieces of wood, just so that I can align this up. And this is what I used earlier. I got this V-notch cut in it, just so I can help find the center of this dowel. And since I've already have nice straight holes drilled, I'm going to be using this in order to try to drill straight through the dowel, straight through the lattice work, and straight into the piece of plywood in the back. So the idea is to line up this perfectly centered, and perfectly center the plywood on the back side, clamp them together like that, and then drill the holes. Alright, once again I'm going to use my long drill bit with this little block that I made to help ensure that we go straight. Alright, let's take this off. And hopefully I have enough battery power to drive in a few screws. For the next step, I'm going to put in a brace over here, similar to this, running this way, so that the arch will be secure, rocking this way. I know that this is a one-time use thing, and it's already quite stable. I really don't think I have to do it, but just in case we have high winds that day, we're going to have lots of vegetation hanging off the top of this thing, and you know, if the wind is gusting to 30 to 40 miles an hour, then it would be wise to have a bracket coming from here down to here on both sides so that we have this rigidity. So I'm going to do that. I could just measure this way and then make a triangle, but I have this piece of paneling that I'm going to use, and I'm just going to stick it about where it's going to go, and then I'm just going to mark it where I want it, here and here on the end. So I'm just going to cut this triangle out, and then using this material I'll make a template and for scroll work similar to the scroll work that I've got going on here. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, we have our template laid out, so we're just going to go ahead and mark it and then cut it out. All right, I'm going to be using these 2x4s to anchor the back brace. I don't really have to do anything to them, but I am going to rip a 45-degree angle on them just so that they look a little more finished and a little more polished. Not strictly necessary, but I'm going to do it anyway. I wanted the anchor for the back brace just to look a little more polished, so all I did was rip the 45-degree angle, not all the way down. I left a little bit on the bottom just to make it look a little more polished. I'm also going to take a 45-degree off the front edge here. This is the installation of the bottom fore and aft bracket. All I did was square it up, put a clamp on it, and I had already put this 2x4 into place that I had shaped earlier, which is even with the edge of the plywood. So now I'm just going to mark this and then drill through where I mark on the other side. So get this out of the way. All right, let's put this back into place and drill it from the other side. All right, I'm going to put these screws in first, and then I'll come back and secure the bottom. Okay, this feels pretty tight, so I feel better about the fore and aft movement of this thing. I think it's secure, and I don't think I'm going to have a problem. All right, so this arch has three basic parts now. We have the base, and this is considered part of the base, these bottom braces. These bottom braces are removable. I could remove them in just a few minutes and replace them in just a few minutes. So we've got the base. We have these uprights here, which is the bottom of the arch. These will be mounted on here, and then the rest of the arch will be mounted on top of this. So we have one sub-assembly, a sub-assembly number 2, and then the rest of the arch is sub-assembly number 3. So let's go put this thing together, see how it works. Thanks to my neighbor Malcolm who's coming over to help me to lift this thing up. Appreciate it, Malcolm. No problem. So I'm just going to pick this up. Check them out, lift them up. For my beloved daughter. God bless you, my dear. Hello everyone. I'd just like to offer you guys an update. Thank you for staying to the end of the video. And when I presented the arch to my daughter, there were tears of joy and amazement. And there's nothing else that a dad can really ask for. And I have to admit that some of those tears flowing with joy were mine. So anyway, thank you very much. I'd also like to report that the wedding has been accomplished and it was fantastic. And with my daughter's approval, I'll put a link in this video to the wedding video. I'd also like to say a big mahalo to the folks at Kaloa Landing. An absolutely stunning, beautiful, world-class property. We were treated so well and we absolutely loved it there. And I'd also like to say that the folks at Kaloa Landing loved the arch and expressed an interest in acquiring it. So, if you want to get married in this arch, you just might have to do it at Kaloa Landing in Kauai and Koipuru. Absolutely beautiful property. Thank you so very much. So, stay tuned for some photos of the arch on the property and the property itself at Kaloa Landing. You'll really enjoy it. Thank you. This is Maverick Mike signing off. Mahalo and ahui ho.